Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast for Uspire. Today we have with us Chirag, who's going to tell us about studying in US as well as studying in France. And yeah, without further ado, let's dive into the podcast. So welcome, Chirag. First of all, let's start by introducing yourself. So your name, where you're from, what program you're studying, which university you're studying, stuff like that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rachid. So I'm an undergraduate student at Sciences Po, but as part of the Sciences Po curriculum, we have to spend our third year abroad. So currently, I'm at George Washington University. I'm graduating this May, and originally, I'm from New Delhi, India.
Okay, perfect. So you said you were initially in Sciences Po, and then you had the curriculum when third year you had to study abroad. So you chose Georgetown University, right?
George Washington, yes.
George Washington University. Sorry. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So let's go to the next question. How has your experience been so far studying in both these countries? Because these countries, I'm assuming, are very different culturally as well as academically. Like the way the system works academically are pretty different. So how's your experience been studying in these two countries so far?
So I'll start with the difference in terms of academics between France and the US. So France, in particular, at Sciences Po, it was the way of examination, for instance, was very essay oriented. It was a lot thinking oriented, whereas in the United States, it's been more skill oriented. And in my experience, there's not as much thinking involved in the education system, especially what I'm studying. So I am an economics major with a minor in international affairs. I'll be getting from that's what the degree I'll get from Sciences Po. And at George Washington, I've taken classes in both economics, some in entrepreneurship and business, and a bunch in international affairs. That's been my takeaway: the focus on thinking in the French model versus the focus on skills and exams in the American model. In terms of culture, America is more easy for Indians, I'd say, because one, English, it's really comfortable because most people in India, we do speak English. In the US, it's really easy to just get by with your language. Second, there's a good Indian community in the United States, whereas in France, both language and the community are very different. So it's a great international experience, but as an Indian, some people might find it a little worrisome.
Okay, yeah. So you said there's a difference in culture as well as the academics, and you said more of like the French curriculum is more focused on like academics and thinking and like learning and that kind of stuff. More, I would say, related to India's curriculum, and the US is more based on like practical applications of those theories or everything you study, the practical applications, the skills you can provide with those degrees. That's given more weightage over there, right?
Yes, and to look at it, however, I'll say the American system has a lot of similarity with the Indian one in the sense that American education is job oriented. Even if we're in an international affairs class, everybody in the class has the goal of getting a job after university. Teachers sort of focus on things that you will be doing in a job. So, for instance, you'll be writing things like a policy memo, or right now I have an assignment where I have to write a speech as an Israeli Knesset member for a final simulation exercise. Whereas at Sciences, the focus was more on going deep into the subject and actually like trying to learn stuff. Not to say that we don't learn stuff in the US, but more to understand why things are the way they are and not just to accept them. And that there was a big academic culture of questioning, and in a way was a little more intellectually stimulating.
Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of students studying in like European schools and like compared to US and Canada. And that's a fair point. There's a vast difference in like the pattern of studying and the way they are tested as well. Coming to the next question, why did you decide to study abroad and why France in particular? And then why did you like, decide to go to US instead of like other countries? Because I'm aware that Swanspo has connections with a lot of other countries as well, like other universities in different countries. So why US specifically and why Swanspo in the first place?
So when I was in high school, I was deciding what do I want to study. I went to a CBSE school and I was in the commerce with math stream, but I was always more interested in humanities and sort of the intersection of economics with humanities, when you can say like political economy and stuff. So my options in India were quite limited in that sense. There were a few universities for liberal. There are a few universities which are great, but comparing it to universities abroad, not the same quality of education in India for liberal education and social sciences. So I applied to the UK and France mostly. And once I got into Sciences Po, I think the decision was quite easy because Sciences Po is ranked number 2 in politics and international studies. So that was sort of an easy decision to make at that point. I did not really know how different it would be to study in France. And I just went entirely with the idea of I want to go to this university and it looks great and very international. And as for what got me to the US, yes, you're completely right. They have Sciences partnership with more than 450 universities everywhere, and my classmates are all over the place right now. But I chose the US because one, my regional focus during my bachelor's at Sciences Po was on transatlantic relations, so Europe and North America. So I wanted to validate that regional focus, which meant I had to come to North America. And second, I wanted to spend my year abroad in an English-speaking country for a variety of reasons. One, that I did not have that English-speaking environment in my day-to-day life in France, which I did not mind. But in my third year, I kind of wanted to focus on professional experiences, especially in the international policy and international affairs space. So that's why I wanted to go to an English-speaking country. I wanted to be in a city which was the hub for all this, which is Washington, D.C. So everything aligned, and that's what got me to George Washington. It was my first choice because they have a great international affairs program at the Elliott School. And it has a great reputation in DC, which when I got here really helped me out, especially when reaching out to people to network or to get information about internships and opportunities. Because a lot of people are alumni of GW or they connect you with people. So that's what made GW.
Coming on top of this question as well, like just to follow up, what would you say was one of your best experiences studying in France compared to studying in US, and one experience that you didn't like in both countries? Like one thing you wanted both countries to have, but they didn't really give you based on your personal needs, and one thing that they both surpassed your expectations in.
So I definitely say the student life in France surpassed my every expectation. Europe has a really vibrant student life, and in India we were mostly told that America has vibrant student life, but in my experience it's been completely the opposite. In America, actually, like during my time, I've noticed the student life is not as vibrant, especially if you're in a city campus, because everybody sort of has their own thing going on. And yes, there's a lot going on in the city, but as a university, there's not a big student life culture as such. Whereas in France, we pretty much knew all our classmates. So in a way, it was also better for us to network because those people in the future will form part of our network. The same kind of culture does not exist in the US. Now, what exceeded my expectation in the US was how much you can network as a university student, because here the focus is on you getting a job right out of your bachelor's. So everybody in their bachelor's is sort of networking. And in that regard, everybody is quite helpful. So if you're in this, you can ask your classmates, oh, like what internships are you applying for? Or what are the organizations that I can look into? And they'll at least be able to help you out with the basics. And people are usually very open to connecting you with other people in those organizations if you reach out to someone. So that has exceeded my expectation in the US. But in France, again, that was completely missing for two reasons. One, that I don't speak very good French. I only started learning French when I arrived at Sciences Po. And second, in Europe in general, there's no culture of working right out of your bachelor's. The universities don't really help you as much during your bachelor's to reach out to people for professional opportunities. And even if you do reach out for professional opportunities, it is a little harder, especially in the international relations, economics space as an undergrad, to get internships or a full-time role, which is almost impossible.
Yeah. I've heard this as well. Like in France and stuff, most people plan to do their bachelor's and right after that, they complete their master's. That's when they start applying for jobs. So the master's is the target where then they look for jobs and stuff. But in the US, most people, like these days at least, are most people not even preferring to do master's, because if they can get a good enough job right after graduating, then they have that job to work for, and then they can grow in that job instead of doing a master's and getting more money involved in that aspect. So that's a good point you brought out, that the academic mentality is also different in both countries. Yeah, coming to this, what would you suggest a freshman coming, let's say, into Sciences Po or coming into US, and if you have any tips that would help them benefit in both countries or things to watch out for both countries?
In Sciences Po, I definitely say, because as I said, that you can't really do much as a freshman in terms of professional opportunities, but you can do a lot to gain skills, soft skills, especially, that'll help you out in the long run by engaging yourself in student life. Most universities in France, I know at least for a fact, have a very strong culture of student government, a very strong culture of student associations, and they're super active. They don't just work with the university. For instance, I was the student representative for my cohort at Sciences Po, and I was part of a sports association. All these things are elected roles. So you get a first-hand experience into working in, if somebody's interested in public office, how elections work, how campaigning work, everything is regulated in that regard. Second, you get a lot of time to interface with people outside your college. So these associations work a lot with the local authorities. We collaborated a lot with the mayor of our city. We collaborated a lot with other organizations such as, but not limited to, when we wanted to do events, we'll individually reach out to the restaurants, the cafes, the event organizers, and it teaches you skills like how do you negotiate a discount, how do you negotiate an event planning thing for an event that you're doing for your university, which helps you out in your job 100%. So that's my advice to a freshman coming to Sciences Po. Take your time and be engaged in as many student associations you can be, because you'll also meet your classmates that way really fast. And these people are all going to be doing amazing things in 5-10 years from now. As for the US, I'd say since your freshman year, same, engage yourself in a lot of associations. But if you're coming to the US, I would definitely be more professionally oriented. So I would engage myself in associations that are relevant to my profession. Most universities, for instance, will have consulting society, foreign services society. There are professional frats, professional fraternities in the US, which are also quite helpful in terms of helping you get internships. They just will help you and connect with some alum of the fraternity, and you will get an internship right out of your freshman year, which is really helpful, especially in the US. So again, engage in the Students Association. But if I were a freshman in the US, I'd also already start talking to seniors, start talking to people who are kind of looking for jobs already, start connecting with people in the cities. If you're in a big city like New York or Washington, DC, especially, because people are very welcoming and would love to talk. And sometimes you can just schedule a coffee chat and get an opinion on what you should do in college from literally the president of the organization you wish to work at, if your cold email works out or something like that.
Yeah. So the reason I said this, and you were telling about this before as well, that in Sciences Po and in France in general, like you get to know all your classmates, because I'm assuming the class sizes are small. So it's a better opportunity to connect with each and everyone and have a more cohesive and collaborative class compared to US, where like each class can have anywhere around 400, 500 students. It's not possible to have like connections with everyone. So you got to start working your way out and start finding people instead of the class already providing you with a good batch of people who you can connect with on a daily basis or a weekly basis. So that's a good difference between France and US to watch out. And the reason that he said that connecting with seniors and mentors and stuff can help you guide your college application is the entire reason we started Aspire. So the next question I have for you is why, because you are also a mentor on Aspire. So why did you decide to join Aspire, and what made you think that Aspire stands out, or why is there gap in the college counseling industry in India that Aspire could potentially solve?
So why I joined Aspire is definitely because I feel when I was applying to college, the mentorship that I was lucky to have a college counselor in my high school. I had guidance from people, but looking back, even those people were not particularly students of the universities I was applying to. So they were third persons recommending me on how I should frame my application, which I guess they've been working on the field, so they had some experience. But I feel nobody can help you out better than somebody who went through that process themselves, and especially recently, which is what I really like about mentorship. And I'm always also I was already doing that through, if somebody reaches out to me on LinkedIn and stuff like that. So I was like, why not join a platform? Second thing that I really like about Aspire is most college counselors in India obviously only help you with your college applications. And once you're done with college applications, that's their job. You pay them, it's over. But I think a lot of things that they do not tell you, especially about life after, like they'll tell you how to get into college, they wouldn't tell you what to do after you get into college. And I think that is what makes or breaks the thing. You can go to an Ivy League, but if you don't know how to properly get the most out of an Ivy League university, you're not gonna do as well compared to somebody who did not even go to a tier 1 college but a tier 2 university in the US, but they know how to milk out every advantage of that university. So these kind of things are, again, only possible through peer mentorship, which some universities provide, but not all. And there's no one-stop shop for it, which I think Aspire is trying to achieve. So that's why I joined Aspire.
That's a good point. You mentioned that your application, like most counselors stop once you start applying, like once you've applied to the colleges, but your main battle comes after you go to the college, because a lot of things are new for you, especially if you're shifting countries. And at that point, if you have to do everything on your own, first of all, it exhausts a lot of your resources, your time, which you could have potentially given into actually connecting and networking with people who can give you potential jobs or other opportunities. And then again, you don't really know if you're right or wrong. You have no guidance. You're basically trying to scout everything for yourself instead of having some people give you their experiences, give you their guidance. It's not like it's a paved way that you have to take their path, but at least you have a guidance that they took their path, they made these mistakes, they made these things that worked out for them, so you can find the best of both worlds and combine that for your personal needs. So that's one of the reasons why we also do post-admissions counseling. And yeah, coming to the next question, I wanted to ask you, how do scholarships work in France and the US? Because you have studied in both countries. Like, is there a better option of scholarships in France compared to US, or vice versa? Anything you had?
I feel in general, funding your education in Europe is much easier, and your education to begin with is much cheaper. For instance, Sciences Po, if you can exhibit that you have a need for a scholarship, they most certainly will give you a scholarship. And scholarships are usually very generous, starting from as low as 20% of the total tuition to 100% of the overall tuition. And this is for Indians, but I know some people from Africa or some other countries that are emerging economies where they get specific scholarships to the extent that their stay in France and their education supplies, everything is also funded. So Europe is a lot of that. A lot of those programs in terms of scholarship, and they're fairly easy. You just have to start early in the sense, don't miss out on the deadlines, try and properly understand what they need from you in your scholarship application. But most of them are need based, so it's not that complex. In the US, I'm not very well aware of how scholarships work because I never applied to the US for my bachelor's. But from my understanding, having spent some time here, as an international student, unless you go to a really great, like top Ivy League university, which like there's a lot many very good universities which actually do not have as generous scholarships. Ivy Leagues, yes, offer financial aid. I know for a fact Columbia has good financial aid program, and again these are entirely based on need, and I don't think they take your merit into account as much. But I could definitely be wrong. So yeah, I'd definitely say in terms of funding, scholarship, and financial sense, European universities are better than the US in that regard.
But what do you have to say, let's say in Europe, can you work part-time to sustain your finances, let's say your rent, food, or does the government provide you some subsidies on that? Because in the US, you can, let's say you're doing university, you can even work part-time and get some jobs on the side to sustain yourself, at least for your monthly financial needs instead of like your tuition fees. So is there a similar system in Europe where you can fund yourself while you're studying as well?
In the US, yes, you can work. You're completely right. But again, there are very like you have a certain restriction on how many hours you can work in the US as well. So that thing exists. In France, I'm sure you can work, but it's not encouraged. And the workload is such that it'll be difficult if you're working part-time. First thing. Second, as I said, during your bachelor's in France, there is no like big culture of working. So you find a part-time job in a cafe or a bar or something, which will help you out a little bit, but not as much. That is for France, and that is for the space that I am in, which is more social sciences. In Germany, I've heard it's much different. In the UK, again, it's a little bit different, and some people work more and actually pay for their expenses on their own. In the US, I feel again, it's yes, you can work, but for instance, as an exchange student here, if you start working while you're a student, that takes away time from your post-completion academic training. So these kind of things have to be thought about because you don't want to waste your time earning money in a job that is not relevant to your field. And you take it just to earn money, but then afterwards, when you have to take some relevant work experience, you don't have time left. So these kind of things we thought about in the US. France definitely has a lot of government support. So irrespective of whether you need the money or not, if you apply for housing aid, they subsidize housing for students in France. So that is great. I used to get out of my rent of around 500 euros. I used to get 100 euros per month as subsidy as a student is amazing because you pay your rent anyway and then that money comes back to you. France also, in Europe in general, also is really great for things like healthcare and stuff. In the US, you'll have to get a very expensive health insurance and people just avoid not going to the doctor and things like that. Whereas in France, I never had to think twice before going to the doctor and you can get proper treatment and it doesn't cost as much because it's subsidized by the government to begin with. So those things do play a role when making your decision as to where to go study abroad when it comes to financials of it.
Yeah, definitely. No, yeah. Looking at just tuition fees, that's one part that's definitely going into most universities. But there's also an overhead cost of rent and other things that come into account, which you have to take before you choose your country. And you just don't want to choose a country based on the limelight of the country and then end up paying more when it's not worth it compared to choosing a country that you might not have heard of before or you don't know how the system works there. But if you find out just a little bit more, you can understand that may be a better option compared to the big limelight countries in most cases. So coming to the next question, what is your one advice for students looking for for internships in US, or let's say if you've heard about any students after their masters looking for internships or looking for post graduation jobs in France, mostly in the US, like internships, getting in internships in US?
So that I can actually help you out with because I've been through the process myself here. Internships in the US, especially in cities, entirely networking focused, or if not entirely, there's a really big focus on networking, especially as an undergraduate student. You have to be proactive. You have to start reaching out to people. Most what one would call glamorous organizations or really big firms would need you to have someone flag your application to even get an interview. And these kind of things, however unfair they might sound, are just how it works in the US, especially. Again, in terms of job progression as well, you have to network to sort of grow within the organization, grow within your role, switch jobs, everything. Networking, one sentence, networking is the way to go when looking for jobs. You can have a bad GPA and you can make up for that if you network well. That being said, GPA is the other thing which is important in the US because a lot of jobs will have a GPA cutoff. So once you put your resume in the system, based on your GPA, they'll all automatically reject or move you to the next step of verification. So 3.7, 3.6, 3.75 plus is considered like a safe benchmark, but obviously the greater the better. Once you pass 3.7, I think it's the same. 3.7 to 3.9 is the same. If you're a 4.0, that will always stand out if you have a perfect GPA. Work experience also matters a lot in the US. Compared to France and the US, they will always ask what experience do you, even for internships, like what kind of experience do you have? And be it in terms of organizing events for your university, be it in terms of organizing events for a little class. It could also be something you did in the class, but they just want to, are you ready for this practical role? At least in my experience, most interviews I had. So yeah, networking and making sure like you have the GPA sorted is good, and be proactive. Is the key to go in the US.
So yeah, so I think your networking also becomes easier and better once you're already proactive in university. So let's say you're networking with someone and you already have a lot of talking points about what things you have been doing or you have done before. That gives you a better chance of them actually being interested in what you have to say, instead of just you reaching out for a job offer where you have nothing to offer, but they have everything to offer to you. So if you're already proactive since your first week, first month in university, and you're joining societies, clubs, networking with students, being part of organizations that are doing bigger than just the academics, because sure, everyone is doing academics. That's like the benchmark that everyone is doing. But what will set you apart from the academic crowd? So having a decent GPA and then having extra stuff on top gets you easier networking opportunities as well as easier options for internships and jobs. Okay, perfect. So coming to the next question, like when do you think it's too early to start preparing for study abroad? Or is there a time when it's not too early and you can start whenever you want to start?
You can definitely start whenever you want to start. I wouldn't say there's any too early of a time. There is definitely a too late, but nothing as such too early. But yeah, I mean, you don't need to start stressing in 10th grade about going abroad or in 9th grade. Like I would say at that point, your focus should be more on, irrespective of where you go, keeping your academics good, because that's what matters. But yeah, I mean, if you have a clarity of going abroad in 9th or 10th grade, the moment you have the clarity and you've decided in your mind, I want to go abroad, you should start preparing in that direction. Because then I would, if you have not already been engaged, you decide in, let's say, grade 9 that, okay, I want to go abroad, you should then start focusing on co-curriculars a lot. You should start focusing on community engagement, because those are the kind of things universities care. You should involve, they like a well-rounded profile. So 100%, if you have that clarity early on, start making a better profile. But that being said, I feel everybody should do that irrespective of whether they want to go abroad. So if you make that decision even later on, you have a decent, well-rounded profile.
Yeah. I think, grade 10, towards the end of grade 10, I think is a good time to start thinking if you want to study abroad or not. And even in grade 9, like some people who already have experience, let's say their elder brothers, sisters have studied abroad and they know about the life abroad, then they can definitely understand what it's like going abroad and they can decide if they want to go there in like 9th or 10th grade. But for a lot of students, they don't really know what it's like going abroad before they start their 10th grade or their 11th grade. So it's not too late. It's just that once you have started to know that you want to go abroad, there's a different kind of preparation that goes into that thing compared to like Indian colleges. So the Indian colleges, most of them will care about your class 12 grade marks and your academics mostly. They don't care that much about your extracurriculars unless it's a liberal arts college, which there are not many in India anyways. But most of the colleges abroad will care about something you've done extra, because most students in those countries are also doing extra in their 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades. That's
and
a
just
good point.
To add what you said without how you have to take a different track, definitely I missed on that point. Some universities, especially in the US, you have to take big exam such as the SAT, that 100% it's better to get it out of your way as early as possible. By that I mean, once you start your grade 11, you should already be preparing, and you should take your first attempt by maximum the middle of grade 11, because my classmates, from my experience, did not do that. And in grade 12, it gets really difficult to manage both your SAT and have that stress of not having a good SAT score, which means you don't have a college application sorted yet, and doing your 12th grade board exams. So yeah, for courses and countries that require competitive exams, I think 11th grade, you should definitely already be preparing for those.
Okay, so this is kind of like one of my last questions to you, but coming to all the points that you've mentioned so far in the podcast and all the questions we've discussed, would you say studying abroad is still worth it, or do you think people should reconsider studying abroad?
I definitely think it's worth it, but it depends on your priorities. If you, in my opinion, again, personally, I think everybody should at least have some study abroad experience. I mean, I understand everybody has different financial backgrounds and as such, but if you ever get an opportunity to do an exchange program, some sort of program, you should. Because firstly, if you studying abroad or just any abroad opportunities in an academic or professional context, gives you the kind of exposure, in an international exposure, in the sense you meet people from different geographies and you understand the way they think and how that way differs from how you think. It's one thing to talk about global issues sitting in your own country, surrounded by people who share a similar point of view, versus discussing those same global issues in a classroom with 12 different, representing 12 different nationalities and geographies. You really understand how, a lot of times, especially in my first year at Sciences Po, it happened to me where so many views that I had about international relations or global issues that, I had made growing up in India or consuming the content that I did, were challenged or were supplemented by information that I got from first-hand people who lived in those geographies, or where the thought process was different. So these kind of things, irrespective of the field you're in, it could also be business, it could be engineering, it could be anything, because in every geography, in every part of the world, things are done differently, and it's always better to learn from different perspectives. So that helps. Second, it makes you more, there's a certain humility that comes in once you go abroad. Again, when you're in India or when you're in your home country, it's like it goes, you always feel like the king, and there's no stopping you. But when you go abroad, you realize how big the world is in a very real sense. You realize how that feeling of feeling as a nobody when you start off somewhere abroad. I think in your early years, especially in these like your 20s, if you get that registers this humility in you, which helps you in everything, be it academics, your professional life, everything helps you develop real-time life skills. You would know to, also adulting, you learn how to become an adult so much faster than if you stay in your home country. So definitely, everybody should consider it at least.
Yeah, you mentioned a point that people don't realize how different the world is, and I think a lot of people have this feeling of imposter syndrome when they first come to universities abroad, or when they first hear about universities abroad, and think, do I even fit in? But that exact question, that do I even fit in, makes you challenge yourself more to grow more internally, personally, financially, academically, in every sense. And that makes you a more holistic person. So I think study abroad, that gives you that edge where you have to manage everything on your own while also enjoying life. So that gives you a balance of both worlds at a younger age. Okay, that was a wonderful podcast with you, Chirag. Do you have any closing remarks, anything you want to say to the audience, anything to sign off?
No closing remarks as such, but just again to stress on the point that one should, if given the opportunity, make the time, try to get some international experience. It's definitely, in not just academic or professional ways, in a very personal way, it's an experience that changes a lot of things. So that's it. But it was great talking to you.
Thank you, Chirag, for joining us today. It was wonderful talking to you. I'll have Chirag's profile link down below from Uspire. So if you guys want to reach out to him to ask any questions about studying in Sciences Po or studying in US in general, make sure to reach out to him. And thank you again, Chirag, for joining us today.
Just because you mentioned that, I am starting my master's at Sciences Po and LSE this fall. So if anybody is also interested to talk about masters or how to apply for joint masters in economics, international development, anything.
Definitely, yeah. That's a wonderful combination, LSE and Sciences Po. So definitely, if anyone has any questions about studying in these two countries as a master student, make sure to reach out to Chirag, and he can definitely help you out. Again, thank you for joining us, Chirag, and it was a wonderful podcast.
Right. Thank you.